Dad wants me back to avoid my grandpa's financial penalty after kicking me out and lying about the rent at the age of 4. I was 21. I lost my mother. I was 17 when my dad got married again. In addition to my stepmother's daughter, Penny, who was 15, they also had a boy, Tom, who was 3, and a tiny girl recently. I've been working since I was 16 in order to save money for personal purchases. When I turned 18, my father told me that although he would still pay for food and other necessities, I was now an adult and should begin paying a symbolic due law $500. We argued, and I was unhappy, but in the end, I accepted this agreement. Dad told me 7 months ago that I had 2 months to leave because stepmom was expecting a kid and they would need my room. Considering that they both have private offices and that stepmom hasn't had a job since the birth of my baby brother, this was odd. They insisted that I move out, though. To be clear, there isn't much drama or conflict between stepmom and who knows, but I don't believe this was an EVYL stepmom act. I'm actually pretty close to my stepsister. I support her with her schoolwork and help her work through her personal issues. I adore her. To recap, I was at a loss for what to do. I can't afford to live alone because I work part-time and attend college to study CIVYL engineering. In order to find a solution, I called my aunt and asked if I might stay with her for a while, offering to pay the rent. She said I could live with her for free because she was surprised by what my dad was doing, but she also promised to speak with my dad when Grandpa VY sighted our home the following. He and Dad had a private discussion. Although I couldn't hear the words, I did hear Dad's irate voice. Grandpa eventually arrived at my room and gave me 3 options. First, I could stay with Dad and stepmom without paying rent. Secondly, I could live with my aunt or with Grandpa and Grandma. Third, Grandpa would pay my rent and other bills while I found a place of my own. He said I could stay with Dad if I wanted to and that I didn't have to make a decision right away. At first, I was happy that I could stay since I believed that everything had been settled. However, Dad and stepmom became openly hostile toward me in the days and weeks that followed, and I felt very uneasy in my own house. Penny, my stepsister, even saw and inquired as to why they were upset with me. When I finally made the decision to move out, I told Grandpa, who promised to take care of everything. He relocated me into one of his rental apartments a few weeks later. Grandpa purchased me necessities like a stove and refrigerator, and the flat is beautiful. He even gave me a check for due law $155,000, claiming that it would assist me in starting to live on my own, and that I could stay there for as long as I wanted without paying rent as long as I was working. My dad and I haven't spoken much since I moved out, even though I miss everyone, especially my stepsister. He hasn't come, and I haven't gone to see them either. I'm still hurt, though. My stepmom gave birth 2 weeks ago. It was pleasant, if a little odd, to VY sit them in the hospital. A few days later, Dad called to tell me that I should return home since he and the kids missed. He went into endless detail about how much he regretted asking me. I promised to give it some thought. I went to see my aunt yesterday and shared what Dad had said with her. With a laugh, my cousin said, "I'm sure he does." I want to know what he meant. They then disclosed a great deal of information that I was pre-VY usly unaware of. It turns out that my aunt's house and Dad's house are actually owned by Grandpa, to ensure that no one in the family would have to worry about necessities, food, and housing. Grandpa had formed a similar arrangement with all of his children and some grandchildren. I had called my aunt at the time, and she had called Grandpa, who was upset with Dad for charging me rent in addition to putting me out. Grandpa VY sighted our home that day and sternly reprimanded Dad, even threatening to kick him out. The petty part begins here. Do you recall the due law $155,000 that Grandpa gave me? Over time, I paid Dad that much in rent, and now Grandpa is forcing him to reimburse me. In addition, Dad is being charged due law $1,200 by Grandpa to cover the rent loss on the apartment where I currently reside. I may be naive, but I was unaware that Dad wasn't earning much money by himself until recently. We had a lovely home, vacations, and a comfortable lifestyle, but I suppose Grandpa was pitching in behind the scenes. With 3 children VYing at home, a single source of income, and the additional burden of repaying Grandpa, my cousin believes Dad is currently VYing financial debt. According to my cousin, Dad wants me to return home because he thinks that if I do, Grandpa won't punish him. To be honest, I have no idea what to do. Although I've been enjoying VYing alone for the past 6 months, I still miss them. I miss the life we had before everything happened. I miss my siblings, but I'm also offended since it appears that money is the true reason he wants me back. First update. Let me make it clear that my grandfather and aunt are from my father's side of the family. Before I respond to some queries, I don't have a lot of contact with my mother's side. I have uncles and aunts, but they don't live close by, and my maternal grandparents died before. Even though I get along well with my two other uncles on my dad's side, my aunt has always been like a second mother to me, especially since my mother passed away. It was implied that my stepsister would have to begin paying rent when she reached 18, and my stepmother was aware that I was doing so. I don't know, though, if she was aware that Dad didn't own the house or how much Grandpa had contributed financially. Monday's update. I called Dad the day following my post to let him know that I had made the decision not to move back. I just explained that I was comfortable where I was and that going back would feel like a step backward, without mentioning anything I had been taught. However, I did mention that I wanted to stay in contact and that they were welcome to have me over for dinner at any time. I also mentioned how much I wanted my stepsister and stepbrother to sit me at. Dad didn't seem angry, but he did sound disappointed. He concluded by saying, "We'll see," and went on. Although I was also a little let down, he called me on Friday to ask if I would like to join them for lunch on Sunday. We decided to have dinner on Thursday, as I indicated that I already had plans with Grandpa and Grandma. Despite the fact that we communicate and chat frequently, I haven't yet told my stepsister about any of this. Although she hasn't heard her parents talking about me, she did say that her maternal grandmother, who is staying over to help with the baby, is incredibly annoying. That made me giggle. I'll try speaking with Dad on Thursday, because I didn't want to raise Penny's expectations only to have him reject my offer of a sleepover. My most significant news is that I recently returned from a sit with Grandpa and Grandma. I told them I want to know everything that was happening, but we also had a great day together. I felt as though I had been ing in a world of deception. I was no longer a child. There were a few extra specifics, but the key points were the same as what my cousin and aunt told me last week. Due to Dad's limited NGS, Grandpa has been covering many of our essential expenses, such as school, medical care, etc. Grandpa also informed me that prior to her death, he and Mom made the majority of the contributions to my college fund. I feel a little foolish for not recognizing it sooner, but I suppose it makes sense. In order for my stepsister to feel included and have the same possibilities as the rest of her siblings, Grandpa has also established money for her. This man is amazing. I realize how fortunate I am to have him, and I adore him so much. Numerous others have made helpful rather than critical remarks, emphasizing how fortunate I am to have grandparents and other family members who can support me. I'm really appreciative and hope to help others the way they help me in the future. I also share my concerns about Dad's financial status with Grandpa. He reassured me that Dad would be all right. He would simply need to practice more frugal spending for a bit. Grandpa vowed to never let any of his children or grandchildren endure hardship or lack basic necessities. He's attempting to teach Dad a lesson that he probably ought to have learned long ago. As many of you have already noted, I have therefore made the decision to keep my distance and not tell Dad that I'm an expert. I think it's best if he keeps ing I'm in the dark, even if several of you suggested that I approach him. Finally, we discussed the reasons behind Dad's expulsion of me. I could see that Dad's actions had hurt both Grandpa and Grandma, but Grandpa also had no response. He claimed that he approached his father for an explanation, but received none. I'll continue to make an effort to connect with my siblings outside of my father and stepmother for the time being. Additionally, I'll attempt to schedule weekly dinners with him. Even though I'm aware that most of what you have all stated about my father is accurate, I still want to make an effort to keep in touch with him. If not for his benefit, then at least for the benefit of my sibling. Don't worry though, I won't allow him to harm me once more. Update from dinner last Thursday. A few indie duels messaged me to inquire on the dinner's success, but there isn't much else to say. I went there after work on Thursday, and my goodness, I miss my siblings terribly. I stayed with them most of the time. My baby sister is so adorable that I could eat her up, and my baby brother has grown up a lot. No matter what, I never want to be separated from them. The only person I maintained in frequent communication with via phone calls and texts was my stepsister, Penny. I unintentionally included her name in my initial post. She is a wonderful lady, and while she's aware that I didn't leave amicably, she is unaware of all the specifics or financial information. She was overjoyed when I asked whether she would want to spend some time at my place for an overnight. She would have started packing right then and there if I hadn't intervened. Guess where my stepmother's mother is staying while she's still there assisting with the baby? In my former room. The baby's room has been converted into a guest room, and because it's closer to the master bedroom, it's now my stepmother's former office. It was a little painful. Her mother continued to monitor me, even though I've only met my stepmother's parents a few times, and they've always been kind to me. She was continually watching me as if she thought I might take anything, regardless of where I went or what I did. She refused to leave my side while I held the end. In any case, supper went as smoothly as you can imagine, except from that. I was happy to see my siblings and play with them for a few hours, even though it was a little weird. I told Penny at the end of the night that we should have a sleepover that week. Absolutely not, her grandmother said right away, but I was surprised when my stepmother intervened. She said I could pick Penny up for dinner on Saturday after soccer practice if she wanted to. My stepmother gave me a very sincere hug as I was VYing. We've always had a decent relationship, as I stated in my first post, but I kind of came to believe that she's just a bad stepmother because so many people have said it. I felt really emotional and bewildered when I left. In the afternoon of Saturday, I picked Penny up. She compared shawarma to a pork burrito when we first tasted it. After watching Saw Inside Out, saw there isn't much of a difference. Spending the day with her was wonderful, and I'm thankful that she's in my life. After dropping her off on Sunday, I walked inside to sit my other sibling. Dad was out meeting a friend from work, so he wasn't there. In case you were wondering, my stepmother used to work for an advertising firm, but is now a stay-at-home mother, and my dad is On Friday, we have another supper planned. I don't want to bring it up right now, but I'm not sure why Dad wanted me to move out or why he charged me rent. I would prefer not to take the chance of destroying my bond with my siblings since things are finally settling down to regular levying. I'm not sure whether there will be any more updates. Second update. Things have been quite routine since my last update. The Friday before last, my dad and I had another meeting. I chose to ignore stepmom's mother, who I'll call Eve for EVYL, even though she was still GIVYing me the EVYL. I was considering taking my younger brother to the park yesterday, and I had planned another supper for last Friday. Dad needed to talk to the entire family, so he called on Wednesday to ask if I could reschedule and go to Grandpa's on Saturday instead. In the interim, Penny has informed me that my stepmother, I'll refer to her as Sue, and Eva been HaVYing a lot of art. Sue's father, who I'll call Lynn short for lying, arrived last Sunday. On Monday, Lynn and Eve returned home after what seemed to be a major altercation. I went to Grandpa's yesterday afternoon, and my aunt was there as well. Dad and Sue showed up shortly after with Penny. Dad apologized to my grandparents and to me, OBVY, usly humiliated. Additionally, Sue expressed regret to me, and Dad explained the events of the pre-VYS few years. Penny was there for the entire chat, but she didn't know all of it while I did. Though it may be a little disorganized, I will attempt to explain everything here. Grandpa and a friend founded a business years ago, and it was a huge success. Grandpa sold the business and made a substantial profit. When Dad turned 25, he made the decision to give a home to each of his children with the understanding that they would use it to pay off debts or purchase. He gave each of his children $350,000. Grandpa didn't want his children to experience homelessness since he had witnessed it happen to others. But instead of purchasing a house, Dad relocated to New York to establish his own legal firm and grow into a well-known and prosperous attorney. However, things didn't work out so well for him, as you may expect. When he ran out of money and was unable to pay his rent half a decade later, he turned to Grandpa and returned home. Grandpa assisted him in finding employment with a friend. After some time, Dad began to rebuild his life, moved out of Grandpa's house, rented a house, met my mother, and started dating her. After a while, he proposed to her after they fell in love. Grandpa came to them and promised to give them a house before they were married. His other children had already heard about this and approved of it. The house would remain in Grandpa's name and eventually go straight to Dad's children in Grandpa's will, though, because he didn't completely trust Dad and he wanted to make sure Dad's future children would always have somewhere to live. I was therefore wrong in the past. Only my dad and two of my cousins reside in the houses that Grandpa owned, my uncles and aunts do. After that, I was born, and for a while, everything was fine until my mother died. When Dad found it difficult to care for me by himself, Grandpa began to VY to financial. After a few more years, Dad got to know Sue. However, Dad never mentioned any of this to her since he felt ashamed about not owning the house in Grandpa's financial. Dad was only a mediocrely accomplished lawyer in her. She asked if she could become a full-time stay-at-home mother after they were married, and she fell pregnant too. Ashamed to refuse, Dad assured her it was all right. Dad was having even more trouble now that he had 3 children and a stay-at-home wife. Dad's SAVYNGS were running low, but Grandpa was still assisting. In order for Grandpa to continue helping for the benefit of the children, Dad acknowledged that he partially blamed Sue on Grandpa, suggesting that she was to blame for his financial difficulties. Let's now discuss Sue's parents, Len and Eve. They started telling Dad that I was being spoiled, that I would handle money carelessly, and that I had an easy life because they thought he was a successful and affluent. Len would tell Dad stories about how at my age, he had to pay his father rent, and how he did the same with Sue's brother, who pulled himself up by his bootstraps and became successful and independent. It seems that Dad was affected by that attitude. He started to worry that rather than succeeding on my own, I would become reliant on him, or more likely, Grandpa. Even though Grandpa had successfully raised 3 of his own 4 children, he began seeking parenting counsel from his in-laws instead of Grandpa, because he was afraid I would become like him and want his dad's financial assistance. He told me that he felt humiliated, which seemed to influence a lot of his choices. When I questioned why he didn't speak with Grandpa first, in reality, Len came up with the rent notion. According to Dad, his first intention was to save the money and then return it to me. However, Sue was unable to save the money since she had a new child, was unemployed, and had to maintain appearances for her family. Additionally, he misled me at the time by claiming that Grandpa had done it with his children and that it was common for parents to collect rent, a claim I only learned to be untrue 8 months afterward. That fact, however, seemed insignificant at the time, given everything else that transpired. I didn't reveal something in my earlier posts because at the time, I didn't believe it was important. I belong to the LGBTQIA group. I've been honest about this, and before my mother died, I told her about it. I don't market it, but this will be important in the future anyway. To continue, Len starts to confide in Dad. Among other things, Len starts recommending that I move out, and Dad starts talking to him about his financial. Dad initially dismisses the notion. Then Dad begins to worry when Sue gets pregnant again. At that point, Len and Eve approach Dad and offer to assist him out, not just by providing financial support, but also by having Eve move in with them once the baby is. Since Eve would be present to assist with the children, Eve even offers to persuade Sue to return to work. However, they stated that I would have to move out in order for this to occur. They said that it was time for me to leave the nest, that the house couldn't hold Eve, and so on. Eventually, they persuaded Dad that my moving out would benefit everyone. Dad didn't share any of this with Sue. He just said that he believed it was best for me and that it looked like a wonderful opportunity given the impending baby. At first, Sue was opposed to it, but she gave in after Dad played the I know what's best card. I have to move out. They said in a recent piece, I explained events from my perspective. Grandpa went to Dad's house that day, and they got into a heated argument, not just between Dad and Grandpa, but also between Dad and Sue. At that point, Sue learned that Dad was relying on Grandpa, had truly little funds, and did not own the house. At this point, Dad's agreement with her parents remained a secret. After that day, I asked Sue why she was acting so rudely toward me, making me feel uncomfortable and wanting to leave. After looking astonished, she apologized and began to cry, stating that she was upset with Dad and never with me. She was unaware that she was somewhat to blame for my departure. I told her it wasn't her fault, and I was crying too. Gentlemen, I believe her, even though I know a lot of you have said negative things about it, and I don't blame you. You can't fake the expression on her face when I informed her I didn't feel welcome. She was merely attempting to give me space, but I'm beginning to believe that she is just as much of a VY Tim of Dad's VY, or as I am. To recap the facts, once I moved out, Grandpa stopped VYing Dad with financial help and began charging him rent for the house. The one expense he kept covering was Penny's schooling. Now that everything is public knowledge, Dad and Sue have had to reduce their spending, which includes selling her car and GIVYing up nice meals and snacks. They received some financial assistance from Len and Eve, but Sue was already under a lot of stress and was pregnant. It was evident to me that Grandpa shared my real sympathy for her in her ordeal. He probably had no idea how much anguish he was causing her. I don't know how he will handle the house with Dad. Eve moved home with Dad and Sue prior to the baby's birth. Things appear to get back to normal after Sue gave birth. But with the new baby, Dad began to feel even more bad about what he contacted me again at that point, as I had informed you. Let's fast forward to my first dinner with him after I left. Dad and Sue observed that Eve was acting suspiciously. Although they talked about it, nothing came of it. After Sue continued to talk to Dad about her mother, Dad began to share with her the things he discussed with Eve and Lynn, including money, raising children, and other subjects. Sue approached her mother after my second dinner, and they got into a heated argument. Eve apparently yelled something like, "I can't believe you're letting that slur back into your home after getting rid of her." During the dispute, it was at that point that Dad finally understood and recognized what a fool he had been. Eve was expelled. They got into another argument when Len arrived to pick her up. In reality, Dad wanted to pretend nothing had occurred, keep me around, and discreetly mend our relationship, but Sue stood her ground. She demanded that he tell Cassie and the rest of the world about everything, not just to me. Thus, we reached the current time. Everyone was crying, including Dad, my aunt, Grandpa, Sue, and Penny. Grandma simply held me close without saying a word. Dad said there would be no more deceit, no more falsehood. After Dad and Sue left, I stayed at Grandpa's because I wasn't well enough to drive. I got home this morning, took a long shower, and sobbed a lot. Now I'm composing this to see if it helps me sift through my feelings and make sense of everything. That must be the end of the tale right now. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I feel sorry for Sue and Penny, sad and enraged. I experience both everything and nothing. Tomorrow, I'll give my therapist a call to see if I can schedule further appointments, although I've been going every Friday. I doubt I'll be able to wait a full week. Ha Vying said that. I guess the person who wagered on EVYL's step-grandmother has won. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around.